Okay, hi HB, and welcome to today's event. Again, thank you for joining us over the past few days. Today is our fourth speaker. We're going to be hearing from MP Ruby Sahota, and we will begin actually hearing from Abjot, who is one of our members, and she will be walking us through a land acknowledgement. And so with that, I will pass it over.
Thank you, Miss. So land and water have been a part of the Sikh identity from the inception of the faith. Guru Nanak Sahib writes in Asa Ki Waat that water is the root of all life. It gives birth to all living things, including our very breath. From Guru Nanak Sahib's emergence from the waters at Sultanpur Lodi to the creation of Khalsa from the Gurbani Patasa Khanda infused Amrit of Guru Gobind Singh Sahib, water is the transformative medium through which a connection is facilitated with Vaheguru. We are people spiritually born from water, who are replenished by sarovars and bodies, who come from Punjab, a land of grain, plentiful resources, and of course, water. Punjab literally meaning the land of the 5 rivers. To understand Punjab and its tumultuous history, you have to understand the water and its connection to the rhythms of life, religious rites of religious passage, and the fight for Sikh sovereignty. Everything in Punjab can be traced back to it. So once again, HB, welcome to the last day of the panelist discussion week as we continue to celebrate Sikh Heritage Month at HB. I hope you've been enjoying the insight we've gained this past week as our various panelists have shared their life experiences as a Sikh. Today, I will be introducing a very well-known female political figure representing our riding, Brampton North. We've seen her make monumental changes within our community over the past 6 years as a part of the Liberal Party of Canada. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming our final panelist, Ruby Sahota. Ruby, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Abjot. It's a pleasure to be here at HB again. It's a wonderful school, and I always have a great time speaking to the students here.
Yeah, you can begin.
Okay, all right. I didn't know whether you were wanting to ask a question or something.
Yeah,
all right. All right. Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a great day. Happy Sikh Heritage Month. I know we're, getting to the end of this month. I hope you've enjoyed all of the wonderful speakers that your school and your teachers have organized through this association. So as you've heard, my name is Ruby Sahota. I'm a federal member of Parliament, and I serve the riding of Brampton North, and your school is in that riding. I've grown up most of my life in and around that riding as well. And so Brampton, being Bramptonian, is a source of great pride for me. And a part of my work and my role and my goal is to also make sure it's a source of pride for others. I think many Sikhs live in this region. Many Sikhs call Brampton home, and many, love being Canadian at the same time, but of course, being amongst community. And over the years, I've seen that watch the Sikh community grow in Canada. I recall, earlier years when I was younger, there was not as much representation. So we're very lucky to have a lot of great role models and representation, I think, in all walks of life right now. So I know that students of your age do have lots of challenges, but I think that's also something that you benefit from that maybe generations before you were not able to benefit from. So like I've said, some of you might be interested as to like how you become an MP, what may have led me down this path and what my background was. So I grew up going to schools in your neighborhood. I'll sure date myself by saying HB was definitely not around when I went to high school, but it was created, I think, just near the final years when I had started university, when I was ending high school. But I was very fortunate to go to a great high school and in this area, and ended up going to university at McMaster after that. I studied political science and peace studies there, and then moved on to law school after that. As a young person, which I know a lot of you are probably great advocates for your community, or you're somebody who is trying to figure out how do I get involved, how do I participate and have some kind of impact in my area. And I would say there's no time better than the present. High school really does give you a wealth of new opportunities that you can participate in. And I think, joining, I was in the student body council. That's a great opportunity, a great platform if you are interested in politics and governing systems. I think you should definitely give that a go, but I'm sure your school has lots of other clubs and interests and stuff. So now's the time to participate in those activities. And then when you end up going to university or college after this, there'll be a ton more types, many more clubs and avenues you can go down. So, always make sure that you're reaching your full potential. And by that, I mean, not necessarily only focusing on academics, which is very important. So don't get me wrong, like that should be, I think, always something that you're striving to do your best in, but also make sure that you're exposing yourself to, different thoughts and ideas along the way by joining groups in your local area. And I felt high school had a big impact on me. It's where I started most of my public speaking. It's where I became more of an activist in those days. I think that's normal. When you're younger, you're an activist at times where you get the opportunity to voice your opinion through public protests and demonstrations, school walkouts, a whole bunch of different things that I have fond memories of when I was younger. But that led into my, my interest in politics. And so I studied political science at university and became very passionate about advocating for people, which led me to my journey of becoming a lawyer. So I practiced for some time before I ran for federal politics in 2015. And, I do want to just say I invite anyone listening here today to reach out to me if that's something that you're interested in. I do have a Brenton North Youth Council that's very well attended, has many local young people, high school students and college and university students that participate. So it's a way for you to have a platform to talk about different issues that are happening in politics in our country, and even social political issues that are happening around the world. And so we get amazing guest speakers to come in, federal ministers and other community leaders in the local area as well. So I think that's a great opportunity for people, but you don't have to join only that youth council. There's lots of other youth councils as well that you could join that other federal members of parliament have. And there's a lot of other opportunities obviously beyond that, but I thought I'd give a little shout out to that as well in case somebody is interested. So what is the life of a member of parliament? I mean, I think that's something that a lot of people have curiosity as to what does that really mean? What do you do? What's the purpose of having, politicians? And I would say that a member of parliament's job is twofold. What you see is, them doing the work that they do in Ottawa, and because we are going through this very unusual time right now, a lot of my work is being done virtually, just like you guys are doing your studies virtually as well. So we have created a system where we can participate in debate in the chamber, vote, and have committee meetings and all of that stuff while being able to attend virtually, because in order for us to go in person, members of parliament would have to fly across country all over, and a lot of our areas are not even connected by air travel at this time due to the pandemic. So it has been difficult to have, the same type of engagement. But yeah, we debate bills, we pass legislation. Mainly what we are is we are legislators first and foremost. In order to, what we do is we influence and create different policy and different laws for the country. And there is a whole process of how a law comes into effect, but I'm sure a lot of you have gone through that in your civics courses. And then the work that we do here locally is really trying to be engaged as possible in our local communities to try to get feedback and input from our community about issues that are happening at the federal level so that we can affect policies and legislation that may be coming through the pipeline. So maybe we'll get into more of being a Sikh in politics and a Sikh female for that. We actually, surprisingly, in Brampton, have more female Sikh politicians. I think we outnumber the males in this area. Federally, we definitely do. But even if I was to look at it, actually, maybe not so much at the other levels, but federally, we definitely do. Federally, we are kicking butt, I would say. So this is a nice picture of me and some of my female Sikh colleagues, Liberal colleagues, that is. And there are now, there is a Sikh female member in the Conservative Party, and that's about it. And I do think that, of course, everybody is aware that Jagmeet Singh is the leader of the NDP and is a Sikh. But there are a few Sikhs in the Conservative Party, but all in all, the Liberal Party of Canada has the most Sikh representation, I think, that any party has ever had. So so it's definitely a point of pride for a lot of people in the community. Why? I think a lot of times people ask why, whether being Sikh has had some kind of impact in selecting these types of roles, because a lot of people will say that, Sikhs disproportionately maybe perhaps or are very involved and engaged in the political arena in Canada. And I would say it comes from perhaps our roots of the faith itself and how the faith came about. And one of the pillars that I think, or that I hold near and dear to my heart, is the aspect of justice and serving for justice, serving justice, and making sure that you're not somebody who is a bystander in life, right? And I think that really gives a lot of Sikhs a real sense of duty to serve their communities in various different ways. So we also have, we see a lot of different organizations popping up in order to do their part when it comes to food scarcity, when it comes to serving the disabled, serving the underprivileged, serving, various different ways, aspects in our community. So I think we're seeing more and more of that, our local organizations popping up, wanting to fill those areas as well. But politics is definitely one that you can make a difference for your community, and I think the Sikh way of life really leads itself to giving you leadership skills and making you vocal and active, and not being afraid to speak out when you feel that, when you feel that there are issues happening in your community, in your country, that you need to speak out about. Karen, maybe we can just flip through these screens quickly, because I don't know if we have a lot of time. And will we have, Abjot, will we have a time for a Q&A at the end?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, that's great, because I really do want to get, and how much time do we have for Q&A?
It depends on when we finish.
Okay, so all right, so I'll try to get through quickly so that we have more time for Q&A, because engagement is probably, it's the most important thing, and it makes it more interesting. But so there have been a lot of, key things that have happened in recent history that I think Sikhs can be very proud of. Right now, the fact that we are celebrating Sikh Heritage Month, we are able to celebrate Sikh Heritage Month from coast to coast to coast in our country. We are the first country in the world to be recognizing Sikh Heritage Month at the federal level, where we did have it provincially in some provinces. So Ontario has been seeing it for some time, but this is a first in the world. So I'd like to thank my colleague Sukh Dhaliwal. You see that picture up in the corner of me and him shaking hands. That is when the legislation was first introduced into the House, and I was able to second the legislation, and it's a very fond memory of mine, and I'm really glad that we now have that, because it gives students, especially students, because mostly schools will take up the opportunity to build awareness and education pieces around these heritage months. So I think it's really important to be able to recognize the contributions of Sikhs in Canada, and for us to be able to understand our heritage, right? Even within Canada, there's a lot that we have done to build this country over the last 100 years, and sometimes we're not fully aware of the impact that Sikhs have had in the last 100 years. So that is fantastic. We have a Sikh senator for the first time in history. We have the first turbaned Sikh judge to the BC Supreme Court, and a big moment was the Kamagata Meru apology in the House of Commons. I would say throughout my terms in federal parliament, another key piece that Sikhs were advocating for was to have an exemption for the Kirpan on flights. That was also brought forth a few years back, so that was big news for the community, so that they don't have to choose between their articles of faith and being able to travel. I know there are still some areas where that can still be a challenge, and so even currently we're working on those areas to make sure that Sikhs can contribute and work in all aspects. And unfortunately, one of the, I would say, might be a question that comes up is Bill 21 in Quebec, and what we're seeing happening there. So I think, we're hoping that comes to the Supreme Court. The federal government can also get involved on that issue, because we're really disappointed as to the last judgment that was made coming out of Quebec on that. It's very disappointing to see that happening in Canada. So the next slide. Well, I think I mentioned some of the stuff about how you can get involved, and I think the best way to get involved in politics is, like I said, get involved in your communities. You will become voters, if not now, very shortly, you'll all be voters. There's always conversations happening, and there was a summit that took place not too long ago with youth across the country talking about lowering the voting age, and there have been some calls from young people to lower it to 16, but unless that happens, the age is 18, and I encourage everyone to vote for whatever political party that they feel most in line with. But I think it's very important for us to make sure that we are practicing our civic duty and not taking it for granted. And I know there's disappointment sometimes because not everything we want to happen immediately happens, or sometimes people feel that governments can move slow and people become disgruntled. But I can tell you this, that through my experience in politics so far, you don't want to lose that spot at the table in a way. And communities that take part in the political process and communities that vote are communities that have a larger say in the long run. They do. When it comes to any kind of political event that takes place that may impact your community, I can assure you, if you are somebody who is very politically active and involved, your voice will be heard, even if it's just not on voting day, but afterwards when you are advocating. And volunteer, make sure, like I've said, you can volunteer in the community. If you want to know what it's like to be a member of parliament or shadow me on the Hill, you can email my office and you can find all that information online. And I'm more than happy. I've shadowed, had a lot of youth come up and shadow me on the Hill. It's not possible during the pandemic, but we will see the light and we will see a day where we are through this, through all of our joint efforts and hard work. And eventually life will go back to normal and those opportunities will open up. So definitely don't forget to reach out to me down the road at a time when you think it is safe to do so for yourself, or you think you're interested, even if it's years from now and I'm still around, then holler at me or somebody else that's here in my place or in another riding. I think more people hesitate to connect with their members of parliament or members of provincial parliament or even their local representatives sometimes, thinking they're out of reach and thinking that they won't be taken seriously, maybe because they're young. But I assure you, if you reach out, you will be taken seriously. And for the most part, everyone who reaches out to me will have a reply or some kind of engagement, and it does make an impact on how we think about certain issues. So don't ever hesitate to do that. But yeah, I want to throw it back to you and questions and answers you may have. And I know that, there's certain things that you wanted to talk about, Abjot.
All right. Okay. So to begin with the Q&A, I know there are a few questions in the chat. I personally have a few questions too that I wanted to ask.
Go for it.
Okay, so just to begin, you are. So I heard that you completed high school at Central Peel in Brampton, and then you went on to McMaster University in Hamilton for your undergraduate degree. And then I believe you went into the States for law school. So this journey of changing environments has definitely probably impacted your attachment to your cultural background or how much you're able to connect with it in general. So, many of us will be going on to our post-secondary endeavors in the near future. So some insight would help on how your experience was completing your degrees in different environments, and how were you able to overcome these challenges of connecting with your culture and staying put?
That's interesting. A very interesting question. I would say it's been a real journey. I mean, I've, like I said before, I've seen the growth of our community here, the growth of our institutions, religious institutions around us that sometimes provide us with that, especially when you're in an area where you don't have, where you don't have that day-to-day maybe sense of belonging, perhaps maybe at a school or somewhere where you feel maybe you don't fit in as much. It's nice to have those religious institutions to go to over a weekend or in the evening. I grew up at a time where I think immigration was, Sikhs were starting to immigrate more and more to Canada. I didn't necessarily have a huge attachment to identifying with my religion, I would say consciously, when I was very young. But over the years, it did develop as I joined different organizations, and maybe perhaps I didn't have friends of my same faith when I was younger. But as the community grew and densified, I started to make more and more. But my parents were very adamant on always making sure that we were connected to our language, our roots, and especially at home. So I'm very fluent in Punjabi. It's because there was a rule in my home to speak Punjabi when you were home, and I think that really had a big impact on my ability to speak the language and connect with other people of my community. If I did not have that language ability, I don't think I'd be as successful as a politician really right now in this community as well, because I wouldn't be able to reach out to elderly and others that don't have the English language skills and connect to them on that level. And in this community, we have a lot of people from the Punjabi background. I attended, camps, Gurmukhi camps, Gurmat camps, I should say, Gurmat camps. I did take Gurmukhi Punjabi's lessons as well over the weekends. In camps, I made a lot of different, I learned more about my faith. I learned more about my faith from a different perspective than when you learn about it through maybe perhaps a Gurdwara in a different language, where I was able to attend camps where you were able to learn about it and translate into English and get a different perspective from younger people, have open conversations about the faith and have more awareness as to what different things sometimes that we just do in our day-to-day lives but don't realize why we're doing them in the practice of Sikhi, that build bonds and relationships with a lot of different people in the community. And I think that really connected me a lot more than anything ever has within my journey to my faith. And so I really encourage you guys to maybe seek out those types of opportunities if you haven't. I'm sure there are some great Gurmat camps now as well, like the ones that were taking place back when I was your age in high school. At that time, I started very much strongly identifying when I was in high school with my faith and practicing more regularly and anyways, I was very, very attached, but then I moved away to areas where there was not that attachment and there weren't other people like me, especially when I moved to the US. I could go weeks and weeks without seeing anybody that was, even South Asian, let alone Sikh. And so I did, like I said, I found out where the local Gurdwara was, and through there was able to meet people. And it's very interesting living in Brampton, and as the community has grown, you take for granted having so many things at your fingertips that you don't realize when you don't have that and you move away somewhere, how depressing it can be sometimes, or you feel like you're missing something, some kind of connection. And so anyways, I would just say seek out that stuff. It's much easier with all the stuff online now, and I think there's a way and a sense of community through this pandemic that we have been able to create just through online resources and groups, and so many events are happening online, discussions, and I almost think this pandemic has given us some benefits that we didn't have before, and a way to connect around the world. Even though we had social media, we weren't engaging in that same way over social media that lately I've been seeing in, even in the Clubhouse chat rooms and all the stuff that's now starting up. I think that's a real benefit no matter where you go, to be able to still connect to people, and it's important. It's important to feel that sense of belonging and someone you can go to if you have questions. Yeah, so I would say the journey has been an up and down journey, and that's okay. That's, I think, in Sikhi as well. It's acknowledged and recognized that it is a spiritual journey, and you can be at different parts of that journey at different parts of your life. So yeah, I just encourage all of you to explore and learn more in a deeper way, not just in a superficial way that sometimes we grow up practicing our faith, sometimes in a very superficial way and not having a deeper understanding. So I do encourage you to seek out resources to have that, because it really has changed my life quite a bit when I was able to get that deeper rooting.
I would definitely agree. Even with the pandemic, we've been basically online. Social media has really taken over our lives in a sense, because this is what we rely on in terms of communication. And, we're in a difficult situation right now, and I'm pretty sure as a politician, it's difficult for you during the pandemic. So, once this pandemic's over, and where do you see Brampton in 5 to 10 years? Like, what are your goals, or what do you think we will become after we come out of this phase?
I think that this pandemic has exposed a lot of shortcomings in the Peel region. We are hearing it day after day, and I was just talking with some of your teachers before this that there are a lot of problems, maybe, whether it's the communications government has with different populations, different backgrounds, ethnicities, maybe, more outreach needs to be done in different language groups to be able to make sure that all Canadians are connected into their governments and know how both ways, how they can advocate for their needs and how governments can make sure they're being communicated to. And so we've seen that, we've known for a while that there's underfunding, lack of resources when it comes to healthcare in this area. And I think, there's a lot of, I'm not going to try to make this super political necessarily, unless you want me to go there and some of your students do, that's fine. But anyways, there are a lot of issues provincially connected, and perhaps it would have been good for me to go into provincial politics, but healthcare underfunding. Why is it so underfunded in this area? Precarious work, employment. We were talking about the overtake of agencies, and our community has been talking about it and yelling about it for a long time. And yet we're seeing now people don't have the benefits they need. They don't have that employer-employee relationship that once used to exist, where an employer was looking out for the best interests, or was the workplace was unionized and had more protections. We're seeing that a lot of people in our community are really getting sick. They're worried for their lives, but they don't have the ability to speak up for themselves because they're worried about losing their job, or they're worried about just newcomers that are coming in, international students, a whole bunch of things where there's exploitation happening, and they feel it's best to just probably put their head down and keep going because it may affect them becoming a permanent resident one day, and all of those things. So I think a lot of things have been, the doors have been blown wide open. We know at this point we can't really just shut them back. We know that we've got to now figure out how to address these issues, and I guess we just heard from the Premier an announcement yesterday, not so much of an announcement, I guess I would say, but maybe a willingness to go towards figuring out something about sick days. Unfortunately, that had been figured out previously, but he had scaled back on having that protection for workers. So I guess that's my part that's getting a little bit political, but I guess we're seeing through this pandemic now that wasn't a good step to be taken, right? So as long as governments, I guess, can change course and fix things, we'll be better off for it in the long run. So I think those are some vulnerabilities that have been exposed. And then I was talking about vaccine hesitancy. I feel that there's some misinformation in our community. There are a lot of people that are sick right now. There are a lot of people in our community that are the essential workers. So it's not necessarily, I don't want to stigmatize the community in terms of saying they're sick because they've necessarily done anything wrong. But we just have to look at the reality. If you have so many essential workers, if you have people who are not going to be able to work from home or be able to take time off if they need to be tested or stay home and all of those things, you're going to wind up with a problem like this. So we have to solve this issue. And it's interesting. I have a colleague, a fellow MP for Etobicoke, whose main work in life has been epidemiology. She's a virologist, and she studied the Spanish flu. Her whole life's work has been studying pandemics. And, she's been talking quite a lot about, we saw racialized people die in the Spanish flu as well. And we're seeing it again. And so I think, a lot of people in our community are also the ones that are advocating too. They're stepping up, right? They're seeing an opportunity and they're starting to figure out how to advocate. There is the South Asian Task Force that has been created that is, really taking it upon themselves to make sure that people are better informed, better communicated to. A lot of doctors are stepping forward and letting people know what's happening in the community. But we all have to do our part, and I'm hoping, I don't know how many people are on this, call, that you guys have these conversations at home as well with your parents. Get vaccinated. At least that is one part. I mean, you have to continue following the safety measures, promoted by public health. That doesn't go away after after being vaccinated, but getting vaccinated is one thing, right? And we're not seeing the same uptake here for certain vaccines that we're seeing in the rest of the country. So, that's a problem. And maybe that's partially our problem as well, because so much negative information has gotten out about these vaccines that people are now scared to take the vaccines, the very thing that's going to help them from getting sick and winding up in ICU, and so many of our people have. So I think those are the areas that we're going to maybe hopefully see real changes in for Brampton. We're going to hopefully see more equity in our policies to make sure that all people and that heavily racialized populations, which Brampton is, get their fair share. So that's what I see for Brampton. I think I see a lot of positives coming out of this for the long run. And overall, if we weren't to focus on the pandemic, there is a positive trajectory that's happening in our city. There's a lot of positive things happening in infrastructure, and so let's see that there may be a lot of good things for Brampton, and hopefully everyone on this call will be proud to be Bramptonian. I think we all have to do our part to stop the stigmatization that happens of Brampton sometimes, and sometimes we do it to ourselves too. Because I've lived here my whole life. I don't see it as a bad place. Like, I've grown up. I'm a professional. So is my husband. We have a lot of very smart, intelligent people in the city of Brampton, and we have great food and we have great culture, and so a lot of we have the best foundation to build on.
Okay, so there's a few questions here. I'm going to go into the chat box. So, like we've said, being a politician in the pandemic, it's been a feat, for a lack of better words. But you've been working through, and you see Brampton. The doors have been open. There's many problems that have emerged through this pandemic. So we know where we're going in the future as a city. Who has been an inspiration in your career in general, whether it is a mentor or one of your parents? Who's been an inspiration for your career?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm just trying to figure out, there's always so many inspirations throughout your life. There's people who have had impacts on your life. I would say, an impact on my life. My parents, nobody, it's probably the easiest thing to say, but my parents have had the biggest impact in my life. And I definitely wouldn't have taken this plunge if it wasn't for my parents, and especially for my dad, because every time I had doubts as to whether I could do this, he was there to motivate and encourage, and actually, really made sure I didn't put down the idea as something that was too impossible, and has always told me that everything is possible. And so, I really, I would say that, your parents, everyone's parents shape their lives in some way or another. But I think, immigrant parents and the journey that they've taken and the struggles that they go through. I was born and raised here, but my parents came at a time where, it was a real struggle for ethnic minorities, and it still is in some ways, but in other ways it's not. right now. In some ways, there's still disparities, but in a lot of ways, people are very comfortable coming and living in Brenton. People can get around a lot easier without having to even be proficient in English, because there'll be somebody around the corner that might be able to speak your language. And, that's very different from the times that they came in. And the racism and the experiences that they went through. And they always, and everything that I've been pushed into, even the Gurmukh camps that I talked about, that gave me a lot of confidence and leadership skills, and I would say also courage to face a lot of difficult struggles in my life. It came from things my parents encouraged me to do and undertake. And so I would say, they are role models, because I've seen them, what they're able to achieve with having such, little to work from. And I had so many, I would say, so many privileges because of what they were able to give me, that I was able to build so much more off of that. And so, I hope that everyone recognizes the contributions and what your parents were willing to leave behind. You might be first generation, second, third generation here at this point, but someone came here to give you a better opportunity and a better foot up in life, and we got to make sure we live to that full potential and that we try our hardest to reach it. And sometimes, failures will happen along the way. And that's another thing I want to say. Failures can be a really good thing. Don't let failures knock you down for too long. You got to get back up. And people who don't necessarily have too many failures in their life eventually do have big letdowns, because they end up becoming people who are not very resilient. And failures teach you how to have strength. And so I would say the better rounded, the more stronger people I meet are the ones that have had some failures in their life, and they have to rebuild afterwards around that. And so, or some major challenges in their life. And so that's another thing I just wanted to say. I encourage everyone. Politically speaking, in terms of role models politically, there were some before me, like Navdeep Bains was definitely a role model to me. He's somebody who's, unfortunately recently just made the announcement that he will leave politics after many, many years of being in politics. But he was one of the first, and he was somebody that I had a relationship with to some degree. And I was very, he was young, he was well-spoken, there was no one like him in politics at the time in Canada or anywhere around the world, I don't think, because not even the country we originate from has young, dynamic politicians, right? So you all have to be of a pretty old age to be in politics in India. And he was in his 20s when he hit politics on the scene here. So it had never really been done before. And I would definitely say he was a role model and a source of inspiration as well in getting into Canadian politics.
Yeah, thank you for that. So there's another question here. Are there any initiatives that you are hoping to bring forth in the future for the Sikh community?
Like I said, Sikh Heritage Month was an initiative. You can do what you want with it now. There are organizations that have taken it up as their mantle, like they're going to work on promoting this Heritage Month across the country. I know the Sikh Heritage Month Committee does different ways of celebrating the month, and they do a lot of good work. Sikh Heritage Museum has done a lot of good work around this area, and I think after we come out of this pandemic, we're going to see really huge celebrations across this country because we've been a little bit limited in the last couple of years. Unfortunately, this occurred just before last April as well. So this is our second celebration of Sikh Heritage Month in this way. And we just really haven't been able to celebrate in the proper way. But I hope to, be involved in years to come in how this continues to grow and build across our country so that we can give others, a lot of good strength and confidence in who they are, and making sure that people can see good role models before them. But like I said, there's other areas of work that we are working on so that Sikhs can, something I'm working on recently with some of my colleagues, so that Sikhs can be whatever they want, can take on roles and jobs anywhere they wish to do so. And there's definitely some challenges that Sikhs, that have a turban, face or facial beard that we're seeing through this pandemic when it came to doctors working in the hospitals, and N95 masks when it comes to people in the armed forces, and gas masks, and a whole bunch of different things that are limiting some opportunities for Sikhs that have that outward identity, right? But even still, like for women in the workforce, for women minorities in the workforce, there have been some steps that we've taken to make sure that boards have more women, have more racialized minorities on their boards, and that they have to be accountable and they have to present, identify how many they have, so that we have more transparency and awareness, and that we can bring more people into those higher levels, because it's really important. We're trying to fund some more studies and work that can give us the proper data. There is an organization, a few organizations that are doing some really great work in this area. South Asian women are some of the most highly educated women. Out of all minority groups in the country, South Asian women are the most educated, but they rate fairly low when it comes to employment. So that there's this real discrepancy there that, okay, well, they're getting a very high education, but they're not ending up with employment opportunities. So what's going on here? Why are not South Asian women equally represented within the workforce? And so we've just announced in our budget the other day, and our budget came out on Monday, and it's really big news. Something we've been talking about for the last 50 years in our country, and that's national daycare, early learning childcare. This is a big issue. A lot of women want to be able to have a family and want to be able to have their careers, right? And that's one thing people often ask me about, like, how do you balance this as a woman? How do you do this? How did you have a child? And how are you, I would definitely say it stopped me from having, or it created a challenge in having more children, having a job like this. And I don't want other people to have to go through that. I want people to be able to reach their full potential, have the family that they want, and have that opportunity. And with nationalized daycare, I think it's going to be such a game changer. What we've seen in the province of Quebec is that it has increased workforce participation for women. They used to have a 4% lower workforce participation than the rest of the country, and now they have 5% higher than the rest of the country. That's huge. And they also increased their birth rate, actually, after putting this in place. I think it went into effect in 1997. So they've been benefiting from a great early learning and daycare program in Quebec, and unfortunately in Ontario, we have the highest costs in the country. And so people are sometimes having to choose. And oftentimes, who are those people? It's women. Women are the ones disproportionately that get affected. And in this pandemic, more women have lost their jobs because of it than men. And we need to get those women back to work if they choose to do so. We need to make sure they have those supports and they have that option. So I think this is going to be big for a lot of women, and perhaps somewhere we can maybe close that gap of having these great educations but not being able to apply them. But there's also a lot of other, systemic barriers and challenges that we still have to overcome. And so this is just one piece of it, but we're working on a lot of other ways to try to reduce these systemic barriers. So a lot of stuff that is good for us, but good for many others as well.
Okay, so I have two questions that I should merge. So I'm going to do that. So one of the questions is, do you have any advice for high school students like us? And another is, were you always super confident with public speaking and you're voicing your ideas? So with the advice and voicing your ideas, maybe you can give us some insight.
Voicing my ideas, yes. Probably since I learned to talk. But that's just, and everyone's different, and I know people who weren't. So I also want to, let you know that there are people who were not comfortable voicing their opinion or public speaking that are in politics today. So by no means should you let that stop you. You can work on some of those things. Voicing my opinion, I think, that was just one of those natural things. That's a characteristic, and my family recognized that and always used to let me know that I spoke a lot more than was needed sometimes as a joke, and that perhaps one day I'd become a lawyer, because I needed to somehow put this to good use rather than let it go to waste. But I'm glad that they always encouraged, though, in some ways. They didn't really stop me or limit me from the conversation, and that sometimes happens in some families and some homes. So that's something I do want to say, that, we shouldn't silence our women. I have heard that within the Punjabi culture, probably within a lot of different other cultures too, that I've heard people say stuff like, girls shouldn't talk so much, or girls shouldn't, they should learn to behave themselves. And that's something we've heard even in the general North American, I think all cultures have that. But we need to do better to make sure, as parents, or we're having those conversations in our homes and calling that type of stuff out, because sometimes I think our parents say things like that without realizing the impact of their words, because they heard similar things said when they were growing up, and so it just repeats a cycle. Sometimes you become your parents, and your parents have become their parents, and so you have to just let them know, realize what they may be saying or doing. And public speaking, I wasn't always confident at public speaking. Sometimes I still, have moments where I'm nervous or I stumble, and I have much to improve, I think, still today. So that is something you can work on. That is something you can totally work on. There's Toastmasters, there's so many different organizations and groups you can join to be able to become a better public speaker. And within school, when you're doing presentations, practice in front of your mirror, do different things that might help you through that. But I would also say it's something my parents pushed me into at a young age as well. So if you have opportunities, and you're scared, it's good to be scared of things. It means that you're challenging yourself, and you won't reach your full potential if you're always comfortable if you're always comfortable in whatever you're doing, then it means you're not challenging yourself, right? You have to be nervous and you have to be scared at some points. That's when you're really taking that next step and pushing your limits. So I encourage everyone to do that.
Okay, so there's another question. You talked about daycare and your excitement for this new budget being released, and being a woman in a political career, starting up a family, even it's difficult, and I understand that. And so, are there any other challenges that you faced, or any resistance being a Sikh woman in politics? It could even be included. It could include starting up a family as well. So, what are some other challenges or resistance you faced during your career?
I think the challenges I've faced, and once again, I think it is something that all women face, of all backgrounds to some degree, but I do think culturally, some South Asian communities are still, a few years behind in that reaching that same, our faith teaches us equality, right? Our faith, that's what's wonderful, about our faith. If you fall back on what our gurus have taught us, and the actual essence of our faith. There are not many faiths today that are rooted in equality and gender equality for that matter. And women within our faith can, reach all levels of practice as well, but we don't see it in cultural practice as much, right? Like when you go to the Gurdwara, you don't see as many granthis or priests that are women, even though there's no level of attainment that a woman can't reach within our faith, where you do have that in a lot of other faiths. Like women are not able to practice in the same way. There's not any limitation on days you can go to the Gurdwara or anything like that. Like women are supposed to be complete equals, but culturally we're still some steps behind, and I think sometimes we still try to or protect our women we try to protect them in some ways from things that we think are going to be too challenging for them, and perhaps some careers and jobs are, more well suited to women. So those are definitely challenges I think that I grew up with to some degree, that some careers are better suited for women, and that politics is a dirty business. Politics, I mean, especially for a community coming from Indian politics as well. Indian politics has an extremely bad reputation. Politics in general can have a bad reputation sometimes. It definitely does, but Indian politics has an even worse reputation, right? And so I think a lot of people sometimes hesitate to wanting to encourage their girls from getting into politics because they do think it's a challenge. It's too much of a tough environment for women to be in, or an aggressive environment. But I want to promote more women to get into politics, because until we have enough representation, we can't change politics. So it really takes women to make that change, and stepping forward and putting yourself entering the arena is what's going to make that change. Just talking about it and hoping that things were a certain way is not going to do it. So you've got to kind of step in. You got to be that person. You got to add your name to the list. We finally have reached 100 women in the House of Commons. That's a big feat. It's never happened before. That's out of 338 seats in the House of Commons. 100 of them are occupied by women now, or held by women. We have a gender balanced cabinet. All of those are making way, are opening the doors for all women and minorities too. However, it's still, you still see a lot less women, minority women in these positions. So even within the women's movement and feminist movements and all of that, and that push to have equality, white women are still leading the way within that fight, right? There is not that same even per capita equality that racialized women have. And so that's something we still have to strive for. And I would say I heard those comments as well, like, oh, this is no place for women within, in our community. You'll end up with a bad reputation, or people will talk about you. And because you are on the public stage and you do open up your life and yourself for people to criticize and talk about you hope it'll be only about your policies and your political work, but that's not the case. In politics, you kind of take that step and you're hoping people will base your arguments on politics, but a lot of times it gets personal, and your personal life gets dragged into a lot of things. And so that's unfortunate, and that's something I think that if more women get involved, we can change it. And I'm hoping that I can, show other women down the road that it is possible. You don't have to forego having a family or a marriage and all of these things for politics. Is it easy though? No, it's not easy. You may have challenges with having a family and all of those things. That's for sure. There's challenges that you have in any field. I think when you end up dedicating more time to your work than you're able to balance, have for your family. So, but I think all sectors and all workplaces are recognizing this more and more, and trying to figure out how to have better workplace and life balance and all of those things, so that we have better mental health, better outcomes of health and lives, I guess, in Canadian society. And I think we were headed in a direction that didn't give us that for a long time. But this pandemic has slowed us down, hasn't it? It's really given us something, a little bit of a check on what we were prioritizing before. And I know I've really veered off this question at some point, but I think hopefully getting into politics and the challenges I had, I guess what I want to say is maybe not going to be as challenging for people of your age when you want to get involved, because I think this pandemic will have taught us some things and figuring out how to balance and make this life possible. Because I used to fly out every Monday, come back on a Thursday or Friday. So I was away from home a lot. I traveled every week. Now I don't travel, I do things virtually. But why couldn't we do things more virtually, here and there virtually before too? Why did you have to leave your family and home for so long, right? And I think even in the business world there, with all the business travel that was happening, they're trying to reassess how they can make that happen. More meetings happen virtually, more deals happen virtually, so people don't have to fly all over around the world, because that does take a toll on one's personal life. And that's why you don't see as many women in those positions sometimes, because we disproportionately have the responsibility of family and all of those things on us. Not that we should, but that's just what's happened over time. And hopefully more and more men will step up and take a lot more on, so that the women in their lives are not the only ones that have to. Yeah, and that's been a work in progress, and my husband's definitely, got to say, taken on more and more over time. And so I think, those things generally can change as long as we take those steps.
I have to agree. Oh God. There's a lot of like. Okay. 1 second. So personally, I see that time too. Like, there has been a shift of roles, even with like my dad taking on more roles. So it is something that we're approaching, and hopefully it becomes a bit more of a norm than what it has been. This is a bit off topic, but another question asks, do you have plans to reduce the inflation of housing prices within Brampton?
Is this the student asking this? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in this budget, we have introduced a new measure. I don't know necessarily how many houses in Brampton are affected by this. They could be. I mean, I just don't have the data. But I definitely do know, in terms of data I've read in news articles, that quite a lot of properties are affected by this in Toronto, and that's foreign buyers having vacant properties. And so there's a lot of vacant properties that are, and BC suffered from this quite a bit, and there was an impact when this policy was introduced regionally there. But this policy will be introduced across the country now, where there will be a foreign buyers tax on vacant properties that's beyond the foreign buyers tax that's already had been put in place in certain regions. So hopefully this will have an impact in bringing down the price a little bit. And if it goes down, in even if, like, let's say, I'm not sure if there's as many vacant foreign owned properties in Brampton, but if it has an impact in Toronto, it will have an impact in Brampton. But I understand a lot of young people can't see themselves being able to afford a home or a property one day. We do have a first-time buyers incentive for people to buy a home that was introduced in the last budget. So, those who know people that are first-time home buyers, definitely look that up. And maybe that can be made more flexible. But we're going to monitor the situation. House prices hopefully could stabilize on their own as more supply comes out. This pandemic has decreased supply temporarily. Supply will increase after the pandemic is over and things can resume as normal in terms of construction and building and all of that. So I would just really also just, let people know, like, I feel like there's this frenzy to buy up all property and homes right now. Like, calm down. There will be more homes on the market and more supply coming out, and people are artificially raising these prices like crazy because they're in this panic buying mode at this time. So I think they're going to wait and watch and monitor to see if this was just a little bit of an effect of the pandemic, and if the natural market will help heal this in a little while later. But if it doesn't, then we may have to step in and do something. But governments are always hesitant to intervene in free markets because it can blow back in your face as well, and actually hurt a lot of people who have invested in homes.
And I think that wraps up the Q&A session from other students. So firstly, it was an absolute honor to have you here today, Ruby. Thank you so much for taking out your time to come out and share your experiences with HB. I'm sure we've all gained much insight on your experience as a female Sikh politician. Are there any final thoughts you would like to share with your audience?
Yeah, I guess I just want to encourage everyone to continue practicing public health measures. Keep 2 meters of distance, wear your masks in public. 1 out of 5 people, the data is showing right now, have COVID in this area. So you can be pretty sure if you're going out there, whether you're just wanting, I know everyone's aching to just get back to normal and see a friend or all of that. I completely get it. I completely get that. But, you have to be careful because you can assume at this point that if you have been in the vicinity of 4 or 5 other people, you've been in contact with COVID-19. So it is spreading like wildfire here. Our hospitals are full, and not just our hospitals. We have contributed to filling hospitals all across the province. So over 200 people have just been transported to other hospitals, and the numbers are just growing. So please, keep you and your family and loved ones out of the ICU, follow those public health measures, and encourage everyone that's 18 and over and their time has, they're allowed to get their vaccine, their time has been called. Please encourage them to go get the vaccine, whichever one it is, AZ, AstraZeneca, Moderna, who cares? You need to get the vaccine. All of them will keep you out of the hospital, all of them. That is what the data is showing, that if you are vaccinated, you are safe from having the severe effects. So that's what I want to encourage everyone to just go out, and if other students can help, and they've been doing a lot of work. I've seen like a lot of young people are really taking up and voicing their opinions online, and I think they're also more, honestly, like you guys are more savvy, you're better at doing research, you have grown up with social media your whole lives, and there are generations older than you that have not, and are not as good as discerning, like, whether a meme is actually giving you factual information or a meme is just, something that gives you a chuckle, but you need to, go to other sources to actually inform yourself. So please help inform your families, your grandparents, and encourage them to get vaccinated, because we really need to come out of this pandemic soon. And it's getting very scary, and I don't want any of our people to die. So do your part. We all need to do our part. And then that's all I'd like to say in the end. And happy Sikh Heritage Month, and go out there and represent your community well. And it's when you're a racialized minority, I gotta say, whether it's fair or not fair, mostly it's not fair. We definitely, like people like me, you end up representing a community when you are in a role like this, whether you've necessarily chosen that or not. People will identify you as somebody of a certain background, somebody who is like a Sikh politician or a Punjabi politician, Indo-Canadian, whatever, label you do get that label. And so I just encourage people to make sure they do their best to be the best mentor, because even as you guys grow older, you're mentors to other people, and you're mentors to your younger, nieces, nephews, cousins, all of those people in your lives. So make sure you're doing your best to be good role models.
Thank you. So for the audience, next week, we will be wrapping up Sikh Heritage Month through some more posts. We'll have a video out next week and some trivia, so stay tuned for that. And thank you, Ruby, once again. So Ms. Duga, if you could take over.
Hi, everyone. Yep. So with that said, thank you again. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Take care. Stay safe.